Good morning and happy Sunday to you. This is On the Block with Bryce. I'm your host, Bryce Castle. Thank you so much for hitting up the block with me today. We got a long episode today. It's a big topic. I have a lot to say about it, so I won't waste too much time with an intro. Today's episode, in some Orwellian nightmare. Again, not going to waste too much time. I will let the podcast do all the talking for me. This is a long episode, but this is really important. I feel that this is something that needs to be talked about, that this needs to be said. So even if you have to break it up with a couple of different listens, I do hope you listen to it in its entirety. I hope if you've never shared an episode before, that you share this one. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, hopefully this episode gets you to want to do so. And without further ado, enjoy the show. So if you've been listening to this show a while, you know I'm not a fan at all of leftist ideology. I think at best, it is a series of contradiction and bullshit, and at worst, it's probably the most dangerous set of philosophies to ever make its mark on human existence. Dangerous as they might be, as imperative as it is to avoid them, we seem to find ourselves at the present time in this country in a spot where leftist ideology has not only planted its seeds, but it's taken deep root, and it is spreading and blossoming far and wide. A couple of years ago, this was just a problem within academia. We all kind of shook it off as kids just being kids. We all had liberal ideologies when we were younger. They'll grow out of it. Except they never grew out of it. Instead, they continued on as young adults, and now adults my age in their early 30s, with the same extreme leftist ideologies. And not only did they do that, they had the media back then. They had our culture back then. I'm talking like Hollywood and other such things like that. They had our politicians back then, even so recently as the Supreme Court itself, the one thing that people kind of cling to keep the country together, the Supreme Court changing the language of a law written 50 years ago so it could better fit a leftist narrative today. And yet, I don't think this is being taken as seriously as it should. And I think it's because most people think as bad as leftist ideologies are, as bad as communism and socialism are, we could never possibly see that here. But that's incorrect. That's wrong. In fact, I think we're seeing more of it than we realize. You may have heard of the book 1984 by George Orwell. In fact, you no doubt know some of the pop culture references that have sprung up because of it. And today, I am going to use some of the main themes from the book 1984 and mirror them to the situations that we see day in and day out in this country to hopefully paint you an accurate picture of just how close I think we are to what people call an Orwellian nightmare, and I'm hoping that by doing this mirrored comparison, you will start to take it a little more seriously as I have. Okay, so first off, if you've never read the book 1984, then I highly encourage you to pick up a copy of it. In fact, after you're done listening to this podcast, put it on your list. Go out, get a copy of it, order it online. If you're like me and reading is tough, either it puts you to sleep or you can't focus on it, you have some sort of reading ADD like I do, get yourself an audiobook copy and listen to it on your way to work, listen to it while you're out for a jog, listen to it in your free time. So let me give you a brief rundown of the book. I'm going to avoid as many spoilers as possible. I'm also going to avoid some of the deeper philosophical concepts for the purposes of saving time, and we're just going to focus on the main themes today. So I'm going to read you a brief summary of 1984 before we get going, just so you kind of know what it's about. And this summary comes courtesy of Encyclopedia Britannica. The book is set in 1984 in Oceania, one of three perpetually warring totalitarian states. Oceania is governed by the all-controlling party, which has brainwashed the population into unthinking obedience to its leader, Big Brother. Big Brother is a middle-aged mustachioed man whose face is plastered all over town under the phrase, Big Brother is watching you. He enjoys an extreme cult of personality, even though there's no evidence he actually exists. The party has created a propagandistic language known as Newspeak, which is designed to limit free thought and promote the party's doctrines. Its words include doublethink, which is reflected in the party's slogans: war is peace, freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength. The party maintains control through the thought police and continual non-stop surveillance. The book's protagonist is Winston Smith. He's a minor party functionary living in London, which has been war-torn by a nuclear war that took place sometime after World War II, about 40 years before. He belongs to what is known as the Outer Party, and his job is to rewrite history in the Ministry of Truth. Of course, the Ministry of Truth deals in the distribution of lies. There is also the Ministry of Plenty, which deals in controlling famine. There is the Ministry of Peace, which deals in perpetuating war. And there is the Ministry of Love, which deals with perpetuating torture and execution of all dissenters of the party. Winston's job is to bring things in line with current political thinking. However, Winston's longing for the truth and decency leads him to secretly rebel against the government. Throughout the story, Winston grows a perpetuating interest in a secret group known as the Brotherhood, who work within the system to pull it apart from the inside out. And that's basically 1984 in a nutshell without giving too much away. So, let's jump into some of the main themes that are explored in 1984, and I am going to mirror them to what's going on in real life as we speak. So the first topic I want to cover is the concept of newspeak. In the book 1984, newspeak is a language invented by the party that basically takes words and slices them in half and then puts them together. For example, the main philosophy within the party is the doctrine of English socialism, but in newspeak it's called ingsoc. So basically it's half the word of English, half the word socialism put together. In the book 1984, newspeak is invented in order to suppress words, therefore suppressing thought, therefore suppressing the possibility of free thought by the citizens of Oceania. But they're not just suppressing words, they're eliminating words altogether. In one of the chapters early on in the book, the character known as Sim, who is a kind of friend to Winston, goes on a long monologue about the beauty, as he calls it, of the destruction of words, claiming that certain words in the English language don't even need to be there when other words suit them just fine. He uses the example of the word good as its opposite being bad. He claims that there's no reason for the word bad because you could simply just say ungood. But newspeak also aims to change certain definitions of words that no longer have any meaning within the party. For example, the word free no longer means intellectually free or politically free. It simply just means the absence or lack of something. In the book 1984, the conceptualities of political or ideological freedom no longer exist as the party dictates all of what people should think and feel. Therefore, politically free or intellectually free have been replaced by the word crime think, because when you think freely for yourself in 1984, you're actually committing a crime. Okay, so how does this actually apply in real life? Well, very simply put, we do this all the time. In some cases, it's a little more harmless, like when you're texting and you say LOL or BRB. We know that means laughing out loud or be right back. Except I've heard people say BRB in their actual conversation. The term LOL doesn't even necessarily mean you're laughing out loud anymore. Most of the time people use LOL to convey that the message they're sending is supposed to be funny, or people respond with LOL just as a response. It no longer actually means you're laughing. So not only has the word changed, but the words have been shortened. That's two different examples of newspeak right there alone. But even when it means the same thing, like when we describe the President of the United States and we call it POTUS, we're no longer just saying President of the United States. We actually dumb it down. We always read out acronyms in this country. And the concept of Antifa is a newspeak word, like straight out of the book. Like literally, that's a newspeak word. That's taking anti-fascist, cutting it apart, and putting it together to make a new word, Antifa. Now, the left like to use the conceptualities of newspeak in order to contort reality into their ideological view all the time. And we've seen this with more than just euphemisms, which is language invented to be less harsh and more politically correct. I mean, they're actually trying to change the definition of words. For example, they don't call themselves socialists. A lot of them like to use the term democratic socialist, except there's nothing democratic about socialism. They think that if they can call it democratically socialist, it will soften the blow, which is kind of an attempt at a euphemism, but that people will also be on board with it. They're trying to change what socialism means, or what we understand socialism to mean, by putting the word democratic in front of it, despite the fact that we all know that there's nothing democratic about socialism. They also did this a couple years back with the transgender movement. I don't know if you remember this, but they were trying to change the definitions of sex and gender in order to fit it in to a way in which they could contort it into being whatever they wanted it to be. More dangerously, though, the left likes to use the conceptualities of newspeak to target their political opposition. So when you think Republican now, the left would prefer that when you think Republican, you think racist. That when you think man, you think misogynistic. That when you think black, you think victim. These are just a long string of words the left has wanted or attempted to contort in order to fit their ideological biases. This is not something we should fall for. This is absolutely dangerous to a society. There is no way in which we can survive as a free nation if we continue to allow words to be contorted into some version of newspeak. Because if we allow that, again, We allow our thoughts to be controlled, and if you allow our thoughts to be controlled, we are no longer a free nation. Okay, so the next thing I want to bring up is the social structure in the book 1984. This is one of those topics that gets real deep in the book, so I don't want to go into the philosophy of it. I just want to kind of talk about what the structure is and how it's used in the book, and then mirror it to what's going on in real life. So in the book, you have the inner party, which is the ruling class elite. They're at the top of the hierarchical food chain. You have the outer party, which are all the people that the inner party controls. These are the people who have been manipulated and brainwashed into doing the inner party's bidding and into following the inner party blindly. And then you have another group of people within the country known as the proletariats. By the newspeak, they're called the proles. And what the proles are is they are basically your poorest of the poor, your lowest of the low. And the inner party in the book doesn't really worry about them too much. They let them do their own thing because according to the inner party, they're not people worth worrying about because they have no intellect, they have no intelligence, they have no idea of the state they're in. And according to the inner party, they just want to be fed, and they want to be allowed to fuck, and they want to be allowed to gamble and drink, and then you'll never have to worry about them. The outer party are the people that the inner party concern themselves with because the outer party are competent, and if you can be competent of doing, you can be competent of thinking. So that's why they crack down on them so hard with all the rules and the spying and the thought police and all that. This is definitely and most obviously a play on the ruling class, the working class, and the lower class, and that's definitely where Orwell got his inspiration. But the way I mirror this to real life when it comes to leftist ideologies is in this way. The left likes to break people down by skin color. The left likes to break people down by sexual orientation. The left likes to break people down by what gender they are, what religion they practice. It's all different sort of breakdowns based on these kind of nonsensical things. And then along with those breakdowns come with an expectation of how you're supposed to behave and then how they treat you accordingly. In the book, because of these divisions, people are constantly afraid. The proles don't really like bothering with people of the outer party. They never really look at people from the inner party. The inner party views everybody as beneath them. And the outer party are afraid of the proles. They don't understand them. They think they're savage. This is the type of division that is required in order to control a populace. And this is what the left likes to do. They like to keep everyone divided by arbitrary things like skin color and sexual orientation, because then it makes it easier to control through the messages in which they want to control them. There's not a whole lot I really have to say on this issue because, again, it's kind of a loose comparison, and the ideology in the book does speak on this a lot more, and I don't want to give it away, and I don't want to dive into it because that could be a whole episode in itself. I just want to say that when we allow ideologies that break people up through arbitrary, nonsensical reasons such as skin color and religion, we create divide in this country that is very counterproductive to any type of actual progress, and the left likes this divide because it gives them something to fight about. They like when people fight. They like when people are divided because then they can sit there and take moral high grounds against certain individuals. They always have a bad guy that they can go after. And so it's very important that we start putting an end to this, because if we don't, it's going to keep leading us into these little pockets of division, and we're all just going to end up hating each other, and that is never good in a free nation or otherwise. So let's get into the next thing, the telescreen. In the book 1984, the telescreen is a TV/video camera/microphone. The inner party, the party, as it's called in the book, they have these things everywhere. It's in every apartment, it's in every hallway, it's in every corridor, every bus, every car, every train, it's in every cubicle. These things are watching everybody all the time. They're listening to everybody all the time. And they are the main source of surveillance for the thought police. The thought police we'll talk about a little later. They have spies and stuff that they use to infiltrate the proles and other such things as that, but mainly they're just watching you through this telescreen. The telescreen is also the main source of propaganda by the inner party. It plays nonstop everywhere people go, whether it be propagandist music or propagandist information. People can't turn it off, and they are basically under the lens of this at all times. The phrase that is repeated a lot throughout the book is Big Brother is watching you, and the telescreen is how he does it. So this is probably one of the more scarier comparisons to real life, because we are being watched all the time. The camera on your cell phone, the camera on your TV, the camera on your laptop, the camera at the traffic lights, the cameras inside of malls, and everywhere you go. We are constantly being watched. Your phone is constantly being hacked. People are constantly listening to you. Google TV spies on you. It records what you say. It sells that information. And not to mention, the government spies on you all the time. Every phone call you make, every keystroke you press on your keyboard, the NSA gets it all, and they get it all, and they put it into a file that has your name on it. They can tap into your phones anytime they want. They can look at your web history anytime they want. It's basically one giant surveillance state at this point, and it's scary. It's a scary thought to know that people that you don't know, whom you can't see, who you've never met, who you will never meet, are constantly watching you. They know your bank account information. They know all your passwords. They know basically everything about you. Every picture you post. Your phone, again, like I said, can be hacked at any minute. Your microphone can be turned on at any minute. You wouldn't even know it. Even if your phone was off, they can still hack your shit. Even if your TV's off, they can still hack your shit. Google got caught spying on people after they hadn't told people they were doing it. And they blamed it on some sort of, we were trying to train our computers to understand language better, so we were recording people in their homes. And it's such bullshit. If you wanted them to understand language better, you would have fucking just had people at the Google headquarters speak to the goddamn thing, but that's not what happened. The NSA, again, like I said, watching you all the time. This is a surveillance state. Make no two ways about it. Now, this has very little to do with the left. I know I've done a lot of comparisons to the left. This is more of a governmental one. And the government needs to be watched too, not only because they're letting leftist tactics and policies infiltrate them every step of the way, but because they are spying on us. And if they can't spy on us, which they do, because the NSA, but if they couldn't, they would work with Google and they would work with cell phone companies to spy on us for them. In the book 1984, Big Brother never really tells the outer party exactly why they're watching everybody all the time. They indicate that Big Brother is watching you, but they never really give them a reason why. But it is hinted that the reason they do it is because of that group I told you about called the Brotherhood, that there are Brotherhood spies everywhere, that the people they're at war with have spies everywhere, and they constantly need to watch things, and they constantly need to watch people in order to make sure that they can pick up spies when and where they show up on a moment's notice. Now, this is a very similar situation to what we have going on today in real life, because the NSA has all this power and we're watching people and we're listening to people. The government's tapping your phone without warrants or without permission or without even having to notify you, all in the name of safety. Ever since 9/11, we've turned into one giant safety fetish consumption machine. It's insane. You know, we're patting people down at the airport with TSA, even though they've never done anything, but now we're looking through you, body scans. Again, the NSA can tap your phone if they suspect anything of you, but there's no rules in actually what constitutes reasonable suspicion, because they're the federal government. They're not like the cops where they need to have reasonable suspicion, but not even the cops follow this rule all the time. So this is a very scary comparison. And whenever they get caught doing it, they always say they've been spying on you, they've been spying on us, or they've put in these new invasive surveillance protocols in the name of our safety. But I paraphrase Ben Franklin for the millionth time. Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase safety will deserve neither and get none. Moving on, in the book 1984, they have a ritual that the inner party puts on for the outer party known as the 2-minute hate and hate week. And what this is essentially is they group everyone together and they show them a piece of propaganda. And they show them this propaganda in order to get everyone into a frenzy. They show the enemies of the state speaking, and they talk about, things going on in the war effort, and they talk about all the spies within the network, and that's why Big Brother's spying on you and all that. And the people, when they see this, they get into this hysteria, this massive frenzy in which they're booing and hissing and shouting, and they're throwing shit at the screen, and they're going absolutely ape shit. It was one of those things that they're kind of like killer bees who frenzy, if you've ever seen that, where they're attacking something, but they just get into such frenzy mode, they're not even attacking the thing that they meant to attack, they're just attacking trees and inanimate objects around them. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but that's what killer bees do. And that's what this 2-minute hate is, and they do it every day for every citizen when they're at work, is they bunch them into this hall, and they play this screen, and then they panic, and they yell, and they go ape shit, and then the image on the screen melts away, and they show Big Brother, and he says something very calming to them, and then they all calm down, and they start chanting the letters B, 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 which stands for Big Brother. It's like they're doing this creepy, super ritualistic chant after going mad like fucking animals. It's a very, very bizarre thing. It takes place right in chapter 1. If that kind of stuff disturbs you like it does me, you're going to get a feeling in the pit of your stomach when you first read it. So now for how this translates into real life. And there's a couple of ways this does this. Number one, a couple weeks ago, look at all the riots we had. People get into a mad fucking frenzy over something they don't like. Somebody starts throwing a brick, and before you know it, it's chaos. Now, there's a difference between protesters and the rioters. I'm fairly convinced of that. But this is practices of Antifa, of course, of people who just want to see the system burn, who think America's rotted to the core, and so they want to burn everything down. And they by themselves won't do it. You don't really see a whole lot of leftists and people who, want to burn the system down. They won't do anything militant when they're by themselves. But then you take a look at the case of like Andy Ngo up in Oregon, last year, the year before, when he got brutally attacked by a couple of members of Antifa. You've seen people, it's circulating around the internet. You can go on YouTube right now and see videos of Antifa people just like sucker punching a guy and then kicking the shit out of him, trying to take the flag away from him. You guys carrying an American flag. They're throwing milkshake containers full of cement. And this is what happens in a mob mentality situation. But beyond that, we don't just see it in leftist tactics. We see it in our mainstream media. Fox News did this first many years ago. You see real time with Bill Maher do it, and I think other networks are doing it too. MSNBC, for sure, I've seen them do it. I don't know how often CNN does it, but I've also seen them do it as well, where you take 4 or 5 people and you put 4 or 5 screens, little mini screens within one TV screen, and you bring up a really heated, pressing topic that takes a lot of time to really discuss, and then you just have 6 people shout at each other for like 3 minutes at a time, and it creates this mad hysteria. And when you watch it, you get as hysterical. I mean, you're not screaming and throwing things at the TV, but whatever topic they're talking about, whether it's pro something or anti something, depending on your feelings on it, you see this frenzy, and then you get frenzied about it yourself. So the next time you talk to somebody about it, you're already kind of in this frenzy state. This is done purposely. This is done purposely by the left in order to incite the violence they wish to see unfold in this country. And this is done purposely by the mainstream media to get people riled up and get them to keep watching. I'm not going to go ahead and call it mind control, but it's definitely a behavioral manipulation tactic that they use. It's dangerous, dangerous stuff for a couple of reasons. If you're coming from the standpoint of the riots, this really goes without saying. That type of behavior is nothing but destructive, and it doesn't do anything good, nor does it get anything productive done. If you're talking the mainstream media, all it does is inflame an issue that needs a lot of thought into just little 30-second sound clips of gotcha moments and this and that, where people are constantly pitted against each other when really we should be sitting down and talking. Any type of mob mentality when it comes to an issue, any type of like feeding frenzy, talking point conversation when it comes to an issue is designed to do nothing but harm. It's not designed to do good. And in this country, we got to start talking about doing good. We're allowing too much of this violence in the streets, and we're allowing too much of this, mainstream news media frenzy fest take over all the topics that you actually need to sit down and talk about and discuss. And if we continue to let that happen, if we continue to just allow ourselves to become part of the mob, whether it's the people in the street or the people watching Fox News and CNN, we'll never get anything done. A survey has recently shown that people are more willing to listen to the other side. They're more willing to come to the table and discuss things when things are done peacefully. Right now, every form of expression that we have when it comes to difficult topics, whether it be the frenzy in the streets, or the frenzy on cable news, or the frenzy in the comment section on your Twitter or Facebook, it's all a fucking frenzy. This is dangerous. We need to watch out for it. We need to stop it dead in its tracks when it happens. We need to start discussing things, not frenzying about things, because the more you frenzy, the more easily you are to control. And we need to be aware of that. Okay, next theme is the concepts of Aronson, Rutherford, and Jones. In the book 1984, these are 3 characters who were vital parts of the revolution that became the party at the start of it, back in the 40s and 50s in the book. And at some point, they became enemies of the party. They outlived their use or some such. It doesn't really state too clearly what had happened, but they were arrested for being traitors, and they were put on mock trials in which they were tortured into making confessions of things they didn't actually do. They confessed to being spies, they confessed to trading party secrets and working with the enemy and all these things. They disappeared for a while, and then they were let out of prison. They rejoined the party. They were trying to be repentant. They were writing articles about how badly they messed up, how sorry they were, and then eventually the party ended up killing them anyway. They disappeared, and they were never seen again. They were what is referred to in the book known as vaporized. They got vaporized. Essentially what happens is Aronson, Rutherford, and Jones are eaten by their own. And this is something very, very common when it comes to the practices and policies of leftist ideology. We see this happen a lot in our celebrity culture. Jimmy Kimmel right now is on the apologetic tour for dressing up as Karl Malone in the early 2000s. That includes putting on dark makeup to make him look black. Jimmy Kimmel has spent a lot of time pointing out the non-wokeness of other celebrities, including that of our president, Donald Trump, for years. Except now he's finding himself on the chopping block because he did a bad thing once, not that long ago. We're starting to see this more and more in the world of academia. Professors who have indoctrinated young people for years with left-leaning principles are now finding themselves on that chopping block from either the next generation or those very people they indoctrinated with those leftist ideologies. Most recently, a Harvard Law School professor has had to apologize after saying that Joe Biden should pick a running mate based on what they have accomplished rather than their skin color. As we all know, in the woke left nowadays, skin color is everything. So think about that for a second. The guy who was indoctrinating leftist principles, or a part of that indoctrination, is now being told that he's not woke enough. The guy teaching students how to be woke is now being told he's not woke enough. But this is nothing new. We see it in the world of politics as well. Has there been a more left-leaning politician than Bernie Sanders in anybody's lifetime? I can't name one, and yet, still, the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortezes of the world are saying he's no longer left enough. And why is that? Because he's white, and he's rich, and he's a man. And so the goalpost is constantly moved with leftist ideologies, and a new enemy always must be found. And the left will eat their own just as much as they will eat people that they hate. In fact, it's easier to eat their own because the people that they're eating already agree with them. So if you go up to a left person and you say, hey, you did a racist thing, they are so indoctrinated into what they believe racism to be, they're going to go, yes, I did, and they're going to repent. But even if they repent, it's not enough. Many times, people have found themselves on the woke left chopping block, begging for forgiveness, admitting to all the things they did that were wrong, whether they did them or not. And it still doesn't matter. Look at Drew Brees, for example. He came out with a statement saying, you shouldn't kneel for the flag. People ate him alive. He retracted it. He said he was sorry. But it didn't matter. It didn't matter because he had already said the bad thing. In fact, worse, he apologized for it. He admitted to it. What the left likes to do, what the characters in the book like to do, is they pick out the people, they force a confession out of them, and then they punish them anyway. Now, of course, if you're not already on board with leftist politics, and if you're listening to this show, that's probably a given, this really doesn't apply to you. You're the enemy of the left anyway, no matter what, just for thinking differently than they do. So you're probably not worried about this. It's nothing new to you. This warning is more for people who are leaning left and finding themselves on the chopping block next. That's the thing about the leftist mindset of always needing a new enemy, of always having a Rutherford or an Aronson or a Jones around that you can call obsolete and detrimental to your party now that they're traitors and all this stuff. The left will always eat their own. They always eat their own. Historically speaking, this is correct, and in real time, this is correct. So, if left-leaning principles are your thing, it's only a matter of time. It's not a question of if, it is when they decide to come for you. Now, this might be a good thing if you're anti-left. Just let them eat themselves. But as long as there's always a new enemy to devour, whether it's on their side or not, we need to be cautious because that enemy could be any one of us at any given moment. And I don't really need to say how detrimental that can be to a country. Okay, next topic is the topic of Goldstein. I wanted to bring Goldstein up briefly. In the book, Goldstein is the enemy of the people. He is the leader of the Brotherhood, that group that works in secret to bring Big Brother down. His face is shown on every one of those 2-minute hates. The sight of him drives people crazy. They look at him and they get frenzied. The inner party has found a way to make people go fucking apeshit over the picture of a guy. And they put words in his mouth and they show videos of him, saying things, and they go, oh, the things he's saying are so terrible, and then people agree that they're terrible, and they go into a fucking fit. And what does this remind you of? If you were thinking Trump derangement syndrome, you are absolutely correct. When people see Donald Trump, they go apeshit. It's gotten so bad. And it's been that bad. It's been that bad from the beginning. Do you remember that girl who, had a breakdown, screaming no, when she found out that Trump got elected president? And it's been that way ever since. Trump derangement syndrome is a real thing. People see the MAGA hat and they go apeshit. People see Trump and they're yelling racist, and anyone who likes Trump's a racist. This is the same thing that happened in the book with the character Goldstein. What the hell are we doing? The sight of a man just because you don't like him makes you crazy? But this is something the left does. This is something that people do when they don't like Trump. We've gotten so emotionally tied to this that we lose control of ourselves over the sight of a person. This should not be allowed. And this is something I just wanted to touch on briefly. There's not much to say on it, but we can't allow ourselves to do that. If Donald Trump drives you into an absolute frenzy, that's a you problem. That's not a me problem. That's not an us problem. But I wanted to briefly touch on that. The comparison between how the characters act at the sight of Goldstein in the book to how they act, to how people in real life act when they see Trump is, it's really uncanny, and it's really frightening that people can do that. But yet, and still, it happens, so something to consider. Okay, so now we're going to get into the really freaky topic that 1984 calls doublethink. Now, doublethink is a very real thing. It is something we do in this country all the time, and it's terrifying. When you understand what it is, it's terrifying. Now, the book goes into it in great detail. It's one of the main themes of the book. It's one of the main philosophical principles within the book. It's talked about in a great deal. It's explored in a great deal. I won't take all day to do it, although you could do a whole episode on doublethink. I'm just going to use Wikipedia to define it, because to try to define it just kind of off the top of my head is it's hard. It's a hard concept, but it's definitely a freaky one. So according to Wikipedia, doublethink is a process of indoctrination whereby the subject is expected to accept as true that which is clearly false, or to simultaneously accept two mutually contradictory beliefs as correct, often in contravention to one's own memories or sense of reality. So basically what that is that you are expected to believe something you know to not be true, and then at the same time forget the fact that you knew it wasn't true. You're believing two contradictory things at once and switching back and forth between them in order to fit whatever is fitting at the time. And that's how in the book the inner party, that's how Big Brother manipulates people. And it's how they get people to, on the drop of a dime, just switch up their way of thinking, basically on demand. There's a piece of the book where they're going through this thing called Hate Week. It's basically that 2 minutes of hate all week long, in which the Big Brother, the inner party, a member from the inner party, is talking about the war they're involved in with the country known as Eurasia. But on the drop of a dime, he switches the enemy to East Asia. So people have been thinking they're at war with Eurasia, and mid-sentence he changes it to being at war with East Asia, and people don't flinch. Winston thinks everyone's going to recognize it, that they're going to see it, but they're so manipulated, they're so practiced in the form of doublethink, it doesn't even faze them. They hear Eurasia, switch to East Asia, and they just roll with it. And the scene follows as they're ripping down all the signs that show Eurasia all over town as the enemy, and blaming it on the Brotherhood, and blaming it on Goldstein's spies. It is a massive form of thought control. It's a massive display of reality manipulation, and it's fucking freaky as shit. And the freakiest thing about it is it does happen here in the real world. So here's a couple of examples in which the extreme left practices the art of doublethink in order to put forth a particular agenda based on what they need out of any given day. So the first example I came up with was the argument of transgenderism. Now, the trans movement is pretty much not a thing anymore, but when it was a thing, the doublethink was pretty insane. The trans argument that the left made was that gender is undefinable, that you could not define one's gender, that there were a multitude of genders, that people could be whatever gender they identified as. At the same time, while making an argument for transsexual people whose reality, whose identity is rooted in gender norms. So at one hand, they're saying that gender is not defined, that you can be any gender you want, that, there's no such thing as sex, but then you have to respect my right if I want to be called a woman today, or you have to respect my right if I want to be called a man today. But if there is no such thing as a woman, and there is no such thing as a man, then how is it that we should identify you as such? This is one example of doublethink that the left has used. Getting into the subject of race protests that we've seen lately, the media did this pretty hardcore. At the beginning, once the protests started turning into riots, the media ran the story as justified, saying that these rioters were pent up, full of aggression, and they felt they had no way out, and so they were taking it out on the system that oppressed them. Only a few days later, they turned around and saying the riots are actually just a bunch of white people throwing shit around. So they're able to say two contradictory things, but pass it off as the same story to fit their narrative. Another one of the left's famous examples of doublethink is the idea of reparations versus the idea to erase the past. We know that right now, the left is going apeshit over statues of George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. There is an article or an essay called the 1619 Project that came out last year, in which that idiot, whose name I can't remember, basically decided to rewrite history and say that America was founded for the purposes of wanting to own slaves, which is just factually incorrect. But people are taking that and running with it. They're using it as fuel to why we need to erase the past, why we need to stop honoring people of the past because they were all a bunch of slave-owning, no-good, racist, horrible people. They've even extended that to include guys like Abraham Lincoln, who was the president who freed the slaves, and to Ulysses Grant, who was the general who destroyed the South. They're calling those guys evil as well. They want to take down their statues. But at the same time, they make an argument for reparations, which deals specifically in crimes committed in the past. So do they want to erase the past, or do they want to rectify the past with reparations? This is an act in doublethink because it is two contradictory facts being touted at the same time depending on what they need. Speaking of racism, the left for the longest time claims that racism is a behavior that can be learned and unlearned, that they have to eradicate racism by educating people through their philosophies and ideologies. Yet at the same time, the same group of leftists also say that if you're white, you're inherently racist. Again, two contradicting things, which can only be possible through the art of doublethink. The last example of doublethink comes from the art of virtue signaling. We've most recently seen this with the dude Aaron Paul from Breaking Bad and a bunch of other actors and actresses getting up there and doing the whole, I take responsibility for all the evil, systemic, white, racist police officers. Yeah, it's very cute and very corny and nobody bought it, but here's the reason it's doublethink. Because in order to fight superiority, they are themselves taking the moral high ground, which puts them in a position of superiority. So they have to believe two things at once. They have to believe that what they are doing is justified by doing the thing that they are claiming to fight against. So they have to believe that it's okay to be the thing that they claim to hate, and they have to believe that they're getting rid of the thing they hate. Huge exercise in doublethink. And why is this dangerous? Well, this is dangerous for a lot of reasons. Number one, it manipulates the facts. It manipulates the truth. It manipulates reasoning. To sit there and say that we need to erase the past because it's evil, but then at the same time say we need to pay reparations for crimes committed in the past, is basically saying we are going to dictate what history says and when, and we are going to dictate what needs to be paid for history and who needs to pay for history at a whim. When you say that sex and gender aren't in conjunction with each other, but then praise a man like Caitlyn Jenner for acting like a woman with all the stereotypical gender roles, you are not only in total contradiction, but you are trying to manipulate the entire scientific field of study when it comes to sex and gender at a whim for your own personal needs and gains. The left is indoctrinating young people to make an argument that the past needs to be erased, while at the same time arguing that relatives of certain people of the past should pony up some dough for relatives of certain others from the past. Total contradiction, but because they are not designed to think about it, they're simply designed to just argue it, they can distort reality for their own gains. We cannot as a society, survive in a world in which reality can constantly be contorted and reworked in order to fit a specific narrative of the day. When you lose track of what is real, you lose track of everything else. And I don't want to give too much away from the book, but the book goes into this a lot more. When you can convince a people that reality is basically on the whim of your own command, you give them nothing solid to stand on in terms of their own cognitive sense of who they are, where they are, and what they are about. And it is a very dangerous thing, and it is happening in real time every day. Okay, next up we have the concept regarding the Ministry of Truth. In the book 1984, Winston, the main character, works at the Ministry of Truth. His job is to intake all the articles that the inner party wishes him to rewrite in order to match the historical narrative of the day. So basically, if Big Brother, say, makes a prediction about the war a week ago, and the prediction ends up being wrong, Winston's job is then to take every newspaper article, every magazine article, anything that ever had that prediction on it, erase it, and rewrite it to match what actually happened. This is, again, much like doublethink, a form of reality manipulation and a form of history rewriting that keeps masses controlled and thinking what you want them to think. This is done in real life all the time, and it's done to such a level, to such a degree, that frightening probably doesn't even come close to describing it in all honesty. So we see this with groups like CNN and the New York Times, and we see it a lot. The best example I can come up with is what happened to the Covington kids. If you remember that story, there's a group of kids from Covington High School who showed up to a protest wearing Make America Great Again hats, and they were standing there, filming it, taking pictures. This Native American guy walked up, started banging his drum in this kid's face, and the kid just stood there with a dumb grin on his face, and that was that. CNN ran the article, they ran all the headlines as those kids approached the man. Not the man approached kids, although that's what really happened. What they said was the kids approached the man and were bullying and harassing him. They slandered this kid so goddamn much that he actually sued CNN and he won. Now, what did CNN do? Well, they did silent retractions. They didn't apologize. They basically just buried it and moved on and pretend like it never happened. They pretend like they never said any of those things. Or at best, they said, well, yeah, okay, the man went up to him, but those kids were still racist because whiteness. You may also remember the 1619 Project. I mentioned that a little earlier in the program. The 1619 Project, which was written by some lady whose name I cannot remember, she's honestly not worth remembering, is a vast rewriting of history. In the 1619 Project, she talks about how America was designed for the purpose of keeping and owning slaves. It's just not true. It's not true at all. That's a show in itself, but it's not true. And yet, the left is running on this article right now. They are fueled by the concepts of the 1619 Project. It is a clear rewriting of history that didn't actually take place the way she says it did, but yet she gets a Pulitzer Prize. I mean, it's insane. They're literally trying to erase and rewrite history to fit their own narrative. And we don't just see this in mainstream media. You also see it in social media. We all know that Facebook and Twitter controls your feed. They control what you see. I can't tell you how many YouTube videos I have in my feed of Stephen Colbert, even though I've never watched a Stephen Colbert video, nor will I ever watch a Stephen Colbert video, because Stephen Colbert is a lefty piece of garbage, in my opinion. You have opinion pieces all over social media that have misleading headlines or opinion pieces that are touted as facts. You have this new fact-checking thing on social media now. They're basically deciding what is true. A good example of this, there is a lot of information out there right now to suggest that COVID-19 may not be transmissible if you are asymptomatic. That's fact-checked and blocked down as false. They're going basically off of what the WHO says and what the CDC says, even though we know the WHO and the CDC are lying, but it doesn't matter. As long as it fits the objective and the narrative they want to push on you, they're going to tout that as facts, and nothing else to the contrary will be taken seriously or even acknowledged. People on Facebook and Twitter are shadow banned all the time. They post things and people can't see them because their shit has been shadow banned. They decide what you see. They decide what's going to be true. They decide what's going to be untrue. They are literally rewriting history. I mentioned it before. Webster has literally rewritten the definition of the word racism. This is so fucking dangerous. And it's dangerous because if you don't allow the past to be a solid foundation, if you treat the past as arbitrary, if you treat it as insignificant things that simply happen just because we say it happened, you basically get to rewrite it any way you want. And if you rewrite history, you can rewrite the teachings from history. And if you can rewrite the teachings from history, you rewrite how people, well, not rewrite, you manipulate in modern time how people interact within life. It is a massive form of thought and mind control. And it is something we cannot allow to have take root in this country. If you lose the past now, you will lose it forever. Future generations will be lost in a history written by a bunch of idealists with an agenda, and you don't want that. In 1984, there is a quote regarding this very subject where the inner party says, "He who controls the past controls the future. He who controls the present controls the past." So be very careful about who you give that power to. Okay, so the last theme I want to talk about from 1984 that parallels real life is the thought police. Now, this is a very scary concept. In the book 1984, the thought police are hardly, if ever, seen. They basically exist in the narration, but they are the driving essence of the book. Like, as you're reading, you can almost feel the thought police surrounding you every second. There's many instances in the book where Winston suspects that he's being followed by the thought police, where he thinks about what the thought police might do to him if he is caught, and it gets pretty scary. It's some intense stuff. They are the group of people in the inner party that are watching you through the telescreens. They have spies all over the place that watch you at work, that try to talk to you to make sure that your thoughts are staying correct. They basically exist to seek out and punish people who think differently than what the inner party tells them to think. They punish people based on facial twitches that they see through the telescreen. They punish people based on odd behavior. One guy even gets put in jail for talking in his sleep. They are the people who erase you from existence once you are caught by them after a mock trial with forced apologies. Like I said, they call it vaporizing. People are caught by the thought police, they are tried by the thought police, and they are executed by the thought police. Now, luckily for us in America, the thought police do not exist in the same way they do in the book 1984, but they do exist, and because they exist, that gives them potential to grow, and I do believe they are growing at an exponential rate. So, I would say the closest thing I can mirror from the thought police in the book to the thought police in the real world would be mostly the internet mob. We've all heard the stories. The lady who gets on a plane going to Africa, and before she gets on the plane, she tweets pretty bad joke, an in bad taste joke, for sure, about going to Africa, hope I don't get AIDS. By the time her plane lands, the internet has decided to cancel her. Why? Because she told a joke that they decided wasn't funny, and therefore she was canceled. Her career was ruined. She lost her job. She lost everything. That is basically social vaporization. In 1984, people are vaporized by being shot in the back of the head and then erased from history as if they never existed. In the real world, people get hashtag cancel next to their name, and 8 hours later, their career's over and they lose everything. Or what about the lady in Central Park who had her entire life ruined, including death threats sent to her on a regular basis for days for making the stupidly horrific decision to call the police simply because she was having an argument with a black guy, threatening the black guy by saying she was calling the police and she was going to tell them the black man was harassing her. Now, is that a stupid thing to say? Yeah, it's a stupid thing to say. Should it end her career? Should it end her life? Should it ruin her life? Well, the answer is absolutely not. But the internet decided that she needed to be canceled, and so they vaporized her. Now, those last two examples were controversial, I know. You may feel differently about them than I do, and that's okay. But what about when somebody touts facts, such as J.K. Rowling when she said that men can't be women and women can't be men? Scientific facts, known and proven and accepted by science everywhere for decades. Well, they tried to cancel her too. Now, when you're J.K. Rowling, you have so much fucking money, it doesn't matter, they can't cancel you. Same thing with Kevin Hart when it came to the Oscars. They told him that he needed to be canceled for telling a supposed homophobic joke 10 years earlier. He stepped down from the Oscars, so they did get to him a little bit. Those two have so much money they really can't be canceled, but that doesn't stop people from going at them. Then there's the story of an unknown like David Shore, who was fired simply for sharing a study he found on Twitter that showed Democratic turnout decreases when riots happen. This was a scientific study posted in a prestigious political science journal by someone studying it who just happened to be black. There was nothing horribly racist about this. There was nothing controversial about this. He saw the study and posted it because he thought it was interesting, and he was fired. Then there's the story of a man named Maji Wadi. He lost his business. He lost his entire business after his daughter posted some racist tweets, or alleged racist tweets. His daughter was an employee of his company, and he fired her and apologized, but it wasn't enough. The internet mobbed after him until he lost his entire business. That was the man's livelihood, and it was taken from him by the cancel culture society, from the social media mobs that we have in this country. Mobs that will cancel you, that will come after you, that will demand apologies and all sorts of other things if you don't believe what they believe, if you say things that they find to be disagreeable, if you even have differences of opinions, if you fucking share something that you thought was interesting. This is what the thought police do in the book 1984. If you say or do or express anything other than what the party wants you to say or express, you are kidnapped, tried, and erased from history. You are canceled, effectively. In the book, they call it vaporized. In the real world, we call it canceling. In the book, they also have spies that move throughout society, watching people, making sure they're not going to places they shouldn't, and making sure they're not doing things they shouldn't be. Well, most recently in Los Angeles, the mayor of LA was encouraging people who weren't wearing masks, who were going outside during the lockdowns. He was encouraging people to snitch on those people, to turn them in. He was willing to pay them to spy on people for him. More than that, everybody has a cell phone now. And on those cell phones, we have cameras. And how many videos do you see where people are constantly trying to film somebody saying or doing something racist, or saying and doing something that is not in conjunction with popular opinion of the day? Normal people, not celebrities, not people who can afford taking a hit, just normal people who are living normal lives, getting canceled by a mob of people on the internet who probably live in grandma's basement, who know nothing about paying bills, who know nothing about real world struggles, canceling people simply for having different opinions, simply for saying things that, well, they very well may be politically incorrect, are not illegal. They didn't break any laws. In fact, the scary part about this is in the book 1984, no laws exist. You can't possibly break a law in 1984 because in the world of 1984, I should say, there are no laws. Yet you can still be attacked, you can still be kidnapped, you can still be tried and executed for going against the party. Much like in the real world, there is no law against saying racist things, unless, of course, you direct them at someone in particular. But there's no law against having unpopular opinions. There's no law against having differing opinions. And yet the internet cancel culture, the thought police of our reality, will come for you all the same. This, of course, is also very dangerous. All this stuff is very dangerous. Unpopular opinions are still opinions that have a right to be said, felt, and spoken by people in this country because we have the First Amendment. We have many other amendments as well. This is why I want to do my series on amendments, because I want to explain why each of them are important. And we live in a culture, we live in a society where groups of people feel that they can go after people simply for saying things that they don't like. It's ridiculous, it's insane, it's dangerous. And if we keep allowing it, they will only get bolder. They will find new things to be outraged at. They will find new reasons to cancel people. They will eat their own as they do, and then they will eat you. It's just how it works. It's just how it happens. It's what happens in the thought police with 1984. They're always hunting somebody, whether they committed the crime or not. They'll just make shit up. And in certain cases, it happens here too. I heard the story of a guy who got fired for saying racist things that he never actually said. I would have to look it up off the top of my head. I don't know the details of it, but I heard that story was out there. I mean, if you want to, look it up, find it, let me know. The thought police mentality must go away. It must end. It compares to so many horrible things throughout history and real life that we just don't need to be compared to. Brown shirts of the Nazi era, all the Stalin spies, everyone in Mao Zedong's party turning each other in, because they were afraid that they were going to be murdered next. This is not a culture you want to set up for yourself, and we definitely need to be mindful of it, and we need to be a little more forgiving of people in the future. And those are the main themes I wanted to discuss, paralleling 1984 with real life. If you didn't already know, as you can tell, they are dangerously close. What's going on in 1984 in the book is dangerously close to what's happening right now. In fact, I make the argument that if 1984 had a prequel, if a prequel were to be written to 1984, it'd be right now. It'd be what we're going through right now. And here's the thing. George Orwell, he wasn't a prophet. This wasn't some Nostradamus-like prophecy. It's not like The Simpsons, where he writes something and then all of a sudden it comes true. And that's the thing. That's the big point I want to make. He wrote about these things. All these things we're going through right now that he was able to capture so well in the book 1984. He wrote about them because he saw them. This shit's been done already. It's been tried before. People have gone through it. They've suffered through it. They've died from it before already. You have the entire 20th century's worth of mistakes from Mao and Stalin and Hitler and Pol Pot and Castro, among others, Idi Amin. All these people have tried this before. It has failed miserably, and for whatever reason, we seem to be trying it right now. This is why I wanted to parallel these things from 1984 to today, because allowing these behaviors is what allows us to fall into that. And again, this wasn't some Nostradamus-like prophecy, okay? Newspeak is nothing new. Newspeak was used for Nazis. Nazi was National Socialist. Gestapo was two German words I can't pronounce put together. Politburo was the political something of the KGB, okay? The parties and the proles and all that's class control by monarchs. If you're born a monarch, you get to become a monarch. If you're born poor, you stay poor. The telescreens were based on mass surveillance during wartime that Orwell himself took part in as a member of the army. Okay? The 2-minute hate is the communist mobs, the propaganda machines from World War I. Rutherford is basically Leon Trotsky. Goldstein is basically Trotsky and a mixture of the Jews, the way that the Germans villainized the Jews. Okay? Doublethink is Stalin's view on the empowerment and destruction of the state. Stalin had this thing where he talked about, in order to destroy the state, they need to become the state. And he recognized it was hypocrisy, but it was okay, because he was doing it. It was a terrible practice in doublethink. The thought police were based on the Toko organization in early 20th century Japan. These people were, it literally translates into thought police. Even Big Brother, the middle-aged, mustachioed man watching you all the time, is based off of Joseph Stalin. So Orwell didn't prophesize this. He saw it already. The world has seen this behavior already. We know where it goes. We have a history of where it goes. We have hundreds upon hundreds of millions dead because of where this behavior goes. This very behavior is trying to erase all that history so you don't get to reference where it goes. And the one thing about it, though, is it's very chaotic right now. You have people knocking down statues over here, but then people over here say this, and then the extreme leftists over here say that. They all seem to want different things right now. But you have to remember, all these principles we talked about, all these themes we talk about, they work in conjunction with each other. All of the different points I made can be repeated within each other. Newspeak can be used as a form of thought control. It is used as a form of thought control. Okay, the idea of erasing history can also be applied to the purposes of doublethink. So they all work in conjunction with each other, and because of that, it may seem chaotic now. But if you can harness that, if somebody could harness it the way Stalin harnessed it, the way Hitler harnessed it, the way Castro harnessed it, the way Gaddafi harnessed it, if you can harness it and point it all in one direction at the same time, you have now weaponized something so insanely powerful, but so insanely dangerous, you're not going to know what hits you. And if we're not careful, we are going to become 1984. Maybe not in this lifetime, but maybe our kids' lifetimes. And one of the big things from 1984 that I didn't talk about is how other members of the party feel, because not everybody loves the party. Not everybody's like Winston. Winston comes across many different characters who have many different views on the subject. But most of them are just blasé. They don't care, or they think, well, there's nothing I can do, so I might as well just, do what I can and enjoy myself. And there's a lot of apathy. Winston believes that the revolution will take place when the proles take over. But then he goes and talks to the proles, and they just want to fucking gamble. And that's it. And we have a lot of people like that in the world right now, who they see it and they go, oh yeah, it sucks, but what are you going to do? Well, you got to do something. Every single one of us has to do something to put an end to this shit that's leading us towards 1984. And I'm not trying to sound like a conspiratorial doomsday prophet, and if I come off that way, that's not my intention. But you have to pay attention to these bad behaviors, or else they will persist. And these people will persist because no one's going to stop them. Because, what are you going to do? You can't be what are you going to do anymore. So when you see shitty things, call it out. Use your reasoning. Use your logic. Understand that 1984 can really happen because it has really happened. And we know this because we have history for now. If they have it their way, they'll erase the history, and then we won't know better. And they can tell us then whatever they want. It happened in the book. It can happen in real life. So speak up. Use your voice. Share your ideas with your friends. Call people out for nonsensical behavior. Stop allowing riots and protests to happen. If the mayors allow it, vote them out. Recall them. Write letters to your senators and Congress people. Visit your mayor. Talk to your mayor. We don't want riots no more. If Facebook wants to continue on with the cancel culture, find a different platform. There's many other platforms you can join. There's more sites than YouTube. Go out there. Look. Dave Rubin. Look up Dave Rubin. Look up locals.com. Look up thinkspot.com. It's time to start changing this stuff, or else it's just going to persist and persist and persist, and we're going to wake up one day in blue overalls in a hate mob looking at a TV screen, not knowing what the fuck happened. I'll catch you next time. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to hit that like button and share it with your friends. If you want to keep up with all our latest releases, go ahead and click that subscribe bell too. Music today was brought to you by White Bat Audio from the Cyberpunk Dark Synthwave Mix. On the Block with Bryce was recorded at Beer and Bourbon Studios in Maricopa County, Arizona, and is a product of Jerk Cat Entertainment.